Hello class, my name is Sam Turner. This is my interview of an expert. The expert that I interviewed was Jeane, the Director of Community Relations and Special Events for the Salvation Army in Colorado Springs, Colorado. To begin the interview, I asked Jeane about her position and what led her to a career in community relations. Jeane is truly a veteran in the field of public communications. Her professional path has led her from editing a skiing newspaper to working in a graphic design studio and a small public relations firm to working for one of the largest social service organizations in the world. Throughout most of this, she has freelance consulting work. At times, Jeane has worked with large corporate companies and nonprofits over the years. Throughout the course of the interview, I got the sense that Jeane is sort of a jack of all trades. She explained that many organizations, especially nonprofits, can't afford multiple people to fill each role, so it's important to have a diverse skill set. In her current job, that might include web development, social media, public relations, or coordinating special events, just to name a few. I found this pretty interesting, as I often think of a job as having a description that you stick to. It made me realize that when you're working with people and doing public outreach on a daily basis, you have to be dynamic and able to shift gears quickly. We talked about some of the specifics of her responsibilities, and I think most of her work can be broken down into a couple categories. As a public relations and community events director, she's a spokesperson for communication with the city government, military installations, private agencies, donors, and community partners. As a marketing specialist, she creates a marketing and communication plan with the public. As an emergency disaster public information officer, she distributes information about the services provided by the Salvation Army to the public and first responders. And as the director of media and corporate relations, she is responsible for cultivating relationships with media and corporations, preparing articles, press kits, and press releases. And so her role at the Salvation Army that seemed pretty straightforward at first is actually highly complex. As the Community Relations and Special Events Manager, she ensures effective management of the Salvation Army, local branding, and community engagement through public relations, marketing, and special events. She serves as the primary contact with the organization's divisional and national communications department, and she's also responsible for cultivating a close working relationship with local media representatives and outlets, corporate sponsorships, and foundations. We talked about some of her recent work, and I asked about some of the events she had planned recently. A lot of what she does is centered around fundraising for the organization, but she also works with community service and education projects. Next, we moved into the topic of adult education programming. She's often involved in the development of materials used in adult education programs. The Salvation Army offers numerous life skills classes, from budgeting classes and job skills development to parenting and nutrition classes. She also helps with an internship program for local college students who want work experience. She talked about the Pathway of Hope, which is an educational program within the community where they give members resources and tools to overcome generational poverty. We talked about some of the difficulties in educating adults. She mentioned that sometimes people can't be forced to learn and change. They have to be ready to do it for themselves. This led us to discuss some of the things that Jeane is mindful of when dealing with others who may have cultural differences, whether these be differences in religion, gender, disability, or anything else. She explained that working for a worldwide nonprofit like the Salvation Army has benefits in this area. The Salvation Army has a proven track record of over 150 years for programs that help adults combat addiction, poverty, homelessness, and more. A lot of people don't realize that their programs in every city are uniquely and intentionally created to meet specific needs in their community. Their local programs are evaluated and adapted every few years by a divisional team, making sure their programs are effective and focused on current best practices. As far as Salvation Army programs are concerned, because they are such a large organization, they have to be even more mindful that their programs are ethical and that they're sensitive to different religious, cultural, and economic backgrounds. That's actually one of the things that Jeane likes best about her job, the diversity of people they serve, and the fact that they truly do serve without discrimination. We touched briefly on the process of marketing programs to the public. Jeane explained that they use a variety of tools from email and social media to printed flyers, newspaper, radio, and TV. She said that email and social media are by far the most effective. From here we moved on to some bigger picture concepts. I asked why successful events and programs that Jeane helps with are so important to the Salvation Army's mission to meet human needs without discrimination. This led us to a discussion of a campaign that she's working on and is actually super excited about called Love Beyond. It's a campaign that's being launched nationally by the Salvation Army on Valentine's Day. It has 4 objectives. Number 1 is how the Salvation Army loves beyond Christmas, because most people only see their red kettles at Christmas and don't know that they do it year-round. Number 2 is how the Salvation Army loves beyond simply providing a service like a meal or a shelter or a bag of food. They love the whole person and address all of their needs, not just one. Number 3 is how the Salvation Army loves beyond a person's circumstances, meaning they don't judge a person based on their circumstance or needs, and they work to help them out of their circumstances. Number 4 is how the Salvation Army loves beyond our differences. This was a good segue for me to ask about the radical planning that our textbook talks about, which seeks societal change through program planning. Jeane said that she is hoping this Love Beyond campaign will be one that leads to a major change not only in how people view the Salvation Army in their community, but also how they view the clients they serve. She's hoping that people will learn to love beyond and love those in need better in the community. In addition to media campaign, there's a large social media campaign with local and national hashtags. Towards the end of our interview, we discussed obstacles that arise when planning events. The most common that Jeane deals with are money, budgeting, volunteers, sponsors, and simply not having enough time or manpower to do it all as effectively as she would like. This is a common problem for nonprofits. The conversation turned to recent events as I asked about what obstacles have arisen due to COVID. The biggest obstacle that arose for the Salvation Army as far as COVID and event planning, like most companies, was that there was no events. That being said, the organization was able to pivot quickly. They conducted a drive-by back-to-school backpack campaign to ramp up their online presence. This included a virtual online Red Kettle for the annual Red Kettle bell ringing campaign. Events have slowly begun to return for the Salvation Army. That said, attendance is still a challenge because the public has fears of gathering for large events. This is still a big concern for their donor demographic, which is largely older adults. They're planning a charity fashion show in March and are hoping to get 200 in attendance. As far as program planning is concerned for the Salvation Army, their programs for feeding, sheltering, and even their Red Shield program for at-risk youth were and still are even more crucial than before COVID, and the number of people in need and the number of people served continues to climb. Finishing up the interview, we talked about virtual events. She said that the upside of virtual events is that the cost is low and it's opened up a whole new mode of event planning for most organizations. During COVID, people were extremely generous and the Salvation Army's donations were actually up from normal. Virtual events have made things like QR codes, Zoom meetings, online donating, and other technologies more commonplace than ever before. The downside of virtual events is that it seems like people are getting weary of them. Even though the return on investment might be good, the overall attendance, success, and income generated from online events is beginning to decrease. Thank you for listening to my takeaways from this interview with an expert. I hope you enjoyed.